It feels like I'm skydiving when I text you. Rose petals on the floor outside your bedroom. Sunshine whenever you smile.
With my experience with scary content, ironically enough, I've always found it similar to sweets and candy. Simply because the more sweets you have, the more you want that sweet sugar rush. So in the same sense, the more you're exposed to horror content, the more scared you're gonna be. Unless you're watching shitty horror movies. But sadly, it seems that the media is more focused on having a horror monster that comes out and jump scares you. And it's a problem because sometimes that monster isn't even scary. They always seem to follow an unoriginal pattern. For example, the infamous insane slasher killer, a long and tall ghostly figure, or a possessed little girl who has her hair covering her face. It's all the same, vapid and repetitious ideas regurgitated over and over again. So in this Halloween spirit, I'm compiling my top 5 scariest monsters. Ones that don't just look scary on a base level, but in the stories they were introduced in, they have subtle psychological traits within them that make them stand out as a horrific figure. This is TMOTalks My Top 5 Horror Monsters. So let's kick things off with the number 5th spot. Number 5. Smile.jpg. Now Smile Dog is one of them creepypastas where I still find a little bit off-putting. I have more respect for this pasta because it's a bit eerie, and at the time it was original, so that was great. And the saying goes is that if you get the original photo via chain letter or email, or they actually give it to you like in real life, then you are cursed and he will pop up in your dreams telling you to spread the word. If you do not spread the word, then he'll appear more frequently within your dreams and you'll become more malicious and demonic. This constant depravity of sleep will end up leading to you going insane and killing yourself. However, if you do end up spreading the word via giving it to someone else, or just going to the streets or your local Poundland or something and then just dropping the photo, and then somebody looks down on it, pick it up, and then they're cursed, so ill times. But if you do end up doing that, then the curse is passed on to them, and then you're saved. And the spookiest part of all is that some people believe that the image originally began with a picture of the devil. Ooh. The reason why people find the aesthetic of Smile Dog so creepy is because it's so juxtaposing. I mean, everyone likes dogs, right? Or animals and pets alike. And we usually identify these animal companions as loyal and innocent. But then all of a sudden, when we look at Smile Dog, there's something wrong. We know how a dog should act, but when we look at Smile Dog and he's smiling with malice and malicious intent, it really builds to the fear and reinforces the contrast between an innocent dog and a demonic little fucking creature from hell. I also like this creepypasta because there's always the potential of having a nightmare. The core aspect of Smile.jpg is that he enters your dreams and torments you psychologically. So also knowing that with dreams, your brain often takes things that it sees during the day and then just compiles it into this one big mesh of a dream, there's always the potential of it picking up Smile.jpg and then implementing that within a dream, thus effectively turning it into a nightmare. The average creepypasta goer would probably have this nightmare and assume that the curse is real. Thus they end up depriving themselves of sleep because they're afraid of having another nightmare of seeing Smile Dog. And it's that aspect that is truly just clever. It's a clever little thing they added. I like that. It's something that most creepypastas don't really think about or overlook. And I think this is why Smile Dog looks as horrific as he is, because it is more likely to trigger a nightmare. Hell, I was researching about a monster within this top 5 list, and then he ended up popping up within my dreams, so hey. So yeah, I like this creepypasta. It's actually pretty well made. Although the original story is pretty cliche and poorly written, the image itself and the rumors behind it tell a much better story, so there we go. Number 4. NES Godzilla. Okay, let me ask you a question. Within the creepypasta community, or universe, or world, whatever, which monster do you think actually looks intimidating? You know, one that actually looks imposing and looks like an actual threat. Well, if I had to pick, personally, the easy answer to that would be Red from NES Godzilla. Red is just one of the monsters where he's perfect the way he is. Like, any subtle changes added to him would just completely ruin him. Like, even if it's a smile, or an evil catchphrase, or cliche things that you do see in a normal creepypasta. I mean, although I do think his motivations are touched on within the story, I do think him as a monster actually works. And the reason for this is because Red looks like he's in constant pain. Like, he always looks like he's just has pure hatred for anything around him, or life itself. And his black, hollow eyes, compiled with his huge, gaping mouth, just kind of shows how empty he is inside. And then once his eyes start glowing, it shows this soul-piercing gaze, just showing that he's ready. He's ready to pounce. He's ready to just go ham. But Red isn't the only intimidating factor. We also have to look at the enemies around him. The entire time, we are shown the enemies progressively get worse. They turn from monsters and kaijus you see in an actual movie, and then they slowly turn into demon hellspawn straight from hell. This is all an attempt to help reinforce how intimidating Red might be, because the entire time we see these demonic creatures act very insidiously, like they're clawing away at other animals, always causing anarchy within the nearby areas and woodlands. And then once you get to Red, you're like, oh yeah, we always have to run away from him. We'd always not come in contact with him face to face at the time. But then once we come in contact with him and he shows his true form, we then realize what this entire pasta has been leading up to. And I think that's a great way to use our expectations. The other ones are intimidating, true, but ultimately Red is the one we should all fear. And the number one thing I love about all of this is the use of Red. Not Red the character, I mean Red the color. You see, Red in this pasta represents more than just blood, red, death, and suffering, and ooh, spooky. But no, it represents corruption, the decay of a game, or the decay in general. Because the first time we see Red pop up on screen, not the character, the color, it's glitching out. The game is glitching out. It looks like the monsters are melting, and it's when we see this where it's like, is the game breaking down? Is it rotting away? And the more we keep seeing the color red, the game keeps on getting more corrupted, that by the end of the game, the entire game is so corrupted and red shifted to the point where it doesn't even look like an NES Godzilla game anymore. It looks like this overly organic, decayed mess of a game that just looks like it came out of a completely different game. Like something you'd see in Doom or Silent Hill. You know, assets and textures like that. And finally, once you reach Red's final level, it's just hell. It basically becomes hell. There's no other way of describing it. There are demons there, there's just fire everywhere, everything's corrupted. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, this is why I consider NES Godzilla as a personal favorite. It's just, it does a lot of things right. Although some things may be pretty bad, for example, Melissa, and a little bit of the ending, but personally I think that overall it was still a fun, creepy, and eerie experience. Number 3, SCP-096. Okay, let's have some fun. SCP-096 is carnage incarnate, man. This monster will stop at nothing to see you dead. Why? Just because you looked at his face, idiot. I know it's not a pretty fair trade, but I'm assuming he must have his reasons. I mean, if that doesn't scream insecure, then I don't know what does. So the reason why I find him scary is because of 2 reasons. His design and the suspense that builds up before he kills you. Okay, so let's start off with the suspense. And by we doing that, I'm gonna have to put on my serious voice now. His aggressive cries echo throughout the entire facility. As you're running for your life, hoping that you find a direction that he cannot follow you in, you notice that the sound immediately gets louder. At this point, you may think he's anywhere, but by this point, it's already too late. You might as well make peace to your god, as SCP-096 may just grant you a painless death. Ooh, hey. If that shit ain't suspenseful, then I don't know what is, you know what I mean? That is terrifying, I'm not gonna lie. The thing I find most scary about a chase scene isn't the person really chasing you and you can see him chasing you. It's more the build up that he isn't anybody nearby you, but you don't know where he is. You don't know if he's going to be right next to you in a moments later, or if he's far away and it's going to take him for a while to get to you. You don't know when he's going to pop up, and it's when he pops up that makes it truly terrifying. It's like it's unpredictable. You never really know. While if we always see where he is, then it takes away from that, because that makes it more predictable. We know when he's going to pop up. We know where he is next. Okay, next we're going to talk about his design. Now, his design is this overly lanky, skeletal figure that just screams death itself. I like how his jaw is massive. It's just like the main focus of his design, considering the fact that everything else is like this pale skin color, and then the red focuses on the claws and his mouth, signifying that, you know, he must give a lot of head. I love how he has pale white eyes. It just makes him look more lifeless. So yeah, man, 096 is one of the best. He's one of the best in the game right now, no joke. But just being ruthless, dumb monster that just wants to kill, he actually does a lot right, and I'm glad he does it. Number 2. I Heard It Too. Sarah, or I Heard It Too, is one of them stories that is short but is extremely effective. This is due to its lovely and impeccable execution of the horror punchline. And in order for you to understand, I'm gonna need to, basically summarize it in an eerie voice. Okay, so here we go. A child is upstairs playing with her toys, only for her mother to call her downstairs. So as she's going downstairs to meet her mother in the kitchen, the stairs cabin door opens, and a hand reaches out to drag the child under. It is her mother. She said, "Don't go into the kitchen. I heard it too." Oh yeah, this is the part where I realized where the story is actually so short where I didn't need to summarize it. I could have just as easily read it off the creepypasta, but fuck it, my interpretation's better anyways. But yeah, the story's like 2 lines, yet it does so much right. It does what most creepypastas should do. Leave information out so that we can interpret it ourselves. As soon as she hears a voice downstairs, and it's not her mother, we are left to interpret what that might be. Who is it? Who is downstairs? Is it a monster? Is it a person trying to kill her? Obviously. But then once we are told that, it's not a mother, we are basically left to imagine what the monster looks like. This is why I kinda don't like the short film as much as the original story, because it's trying to show us what the monster would look like. But the problem with this is that the look of the monster within the short film is cliche and boring. It doesn't look scary, it's just it's got blacked out eyes, this jaw thing going on with CGI, and it even has the long hair thing I'm on about, with like a white cloak and that. It's just not really creepy, it's just cliche. I'm bored of seeing the same thing. I wanted to see something different. This is why I like the animated version much better, because the look of it is just, nah mate, I'd rather not. It reminds me a bit of 096. I think it's because it falls into the uncanny valley as well. It's because it has a human face, yeah, but then the rest of it is just so inhuman to the point where it's just like, it's a bit eerie. Not only that, but her voice echoing throughout the entire house just is very intimidating. It reminds me a lot of SCP-096. Again, now that I think about it, this reminds me a lot about 096. There's blood nearby the mouth, and constantly keeps on screaming. It has a huge jaw. It'll stop at nothing to kill whatever it's looking for. Yeah, so for this pasta, I have a lot of respect for it. I mean, what it's done is absolutely revolutionary for the creepypasta community. Writing a story that is really creepy, but in 2 lines, like how do you do that? Most stories would have to write chapters upon chapters to build a lot of suspense, but nah, this one does it in 2 lines. How does... What? In fact, it was so good that it won an award. Well, I guess it's well deserved. Number 1. The number 1 thing I have found most scary out of every single piece of horror media has to be SCP-106. Where do I begin? Well, for starters, his uncanny design takes the appearance of an elderly man with a sinister smile. The victims are humans, drained to husks, poor souls rotted away to the core, having to suffer a slow and excruciating death, of which SCP-106 can extend for as long as he wants within his own pocket dimension. A world of pure anarchy resembling that of the horrors of the war. The suspenseful PTSD-inducing chase that ensues as SCP-106 hunts you down like a new toy to play with. His concerning age range preference of 10 to 25 years reflects his willingness to kill the light of the youth and consume everything within darkness, rot and decay. And he even has a shocking backstory to boot. I could go on and on about how SCP-106 terrifies me to this day, but unlike 106, SCP-096 only induces primal fear. You know, fear of when you're getting chased by a monster, like a bear or something. However, with SCP-106, his fears include everything else. Primal fear, fear of the unknown, supernatural fear, the death of old age, fear of the uncanny, and plenty more I can't list off the top of my head. And his origin story is so grounded to the point where it's difficult to not get sucked into it. You go from suspending your disbelief to actually questioning whether it's real or not.
The corporal had proved a changed man over the next few days. He was more talkative, but quickly had men wishing for his old, unsettling silence. He rambled about the joys of close spaces, of creation and destruction that seemed to spring up all around them, about human pleasures missed, the dimensions and ages of which made some men threaten Corporal Lawrence with a quiet and ignoble death, which only seemed to stretch the near constant smile in his face even wider. Private Dixon, one of the corporal's bunkmates, whispered to a friend that he had woken once to find the corporal standing over him in the night, his eyes as bright and flat as silver dollars. They found the private the next day, snarled in the barbed wire, his intestines spread nearly 10 feet around him, in every direction. Not one man from that trench survived the Great War.
Oh yeah, and do you remember that thing I said back in Smile Dog segment? You know, about me seeing a monster in a nightmare? Yeah, well, that was 106. I was in my fucking house, yeah, and then there was the black corrosive ooze smeared everywhere, on the walls, on the floor, even on the kitchen tiles and windows. And then, with a terrifying grin, SCP-106 submerged from the ground. Luckily enough, since I was black, I dashed straight out of the house in seconds. Like, I was not looking back in that dream. But still, Smile Dog never gave me a nightmare. I was never scarred by NES Godzilla. I heard it too could be easily overlooked. And SCP-096 is just a ruthless killing machine. That's all you really get. But with SCP-106, he does everything that the others did, but more. Way fucking more. But at this point, I have no shame saying that, in my opinion, SCP-106 is the scariest monster in all of fiction. And I mean it, fam. I mean it. This is it for me. This is the peak. In conclusion, while doing this, I was originally going to make it a top 10, but I instead dialed it down to a top 5 instead. The reasons for this is not only because of time restraints, but that, not trying to boast or anything, but very few things scare me nowadays. I remember back in the old days where I'd watch just a top scariest list and it featured all the Ben Drowns and the Slendermans and then all thems, and I was terrified for a month. Like, I couldn't sleep alone. Back when I think I was 12 back then. So yeah, for my parents, that must be extremely fucking annoying to deal with. But you know what, as I've grown, I've somewhat missed fear. I've just missed the insecurity of it. The feeling of fear was actually quite fun while it lasted. Like I stated, it's like a temporary sugar rush that fades off after a while. But now, since I can see the cliches more clearly, and the same unoriginal ideas being played over and over again, it's just all the same to me now. Sometimes, instead of just being bored, I actually just laugh at it, because it's just that mediocre nowadays. Maybe it's probably because I'm always looking at the mainstream. Maybe I just ain't looking hard enough. Maybe I just need to go a bit more obscure. I mean, this does have some truth behind it. Slenderman was actually pretty creepy before it became mainstream, so it'll only be logical for me to look at the less popular stories at the time. Sooner or later I will find that story that will bring me back to the old days. But until then, I'll be here waiting, watching, ready for what the horror community may throw at me. Happy Halloween.